The pearlescent ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its crystalline surface refracting the morning sunlight into prismatic patterns across the clouds. Inside, Ambassador Talia of the Luminari stood motionless, her silver-tinted skin barely betraying the rapid thoughts racing through her mind. After centuries of observation, her people had finally decided to make official contact with Earth, a planet whose inhabitants both fascinated and puzzled them with their paradoxical nature. Commander Rachel Winter watched the alien vessels approach from the New Geneva International Space Center's observation deck. Her distinguished career in diplomatic security had earned her this assignment, though nothing in her 20 years of service had prepared her for this moment. The ship before her defied conventional aerodynamics, moving with an ethereal grace that seemed to mock Earth's most advanced aerospace engineering. Quite a sight, isn't it? The voice belonged to Director Marcus Sullivan, the veteran diplomat who had orchestrated this historic meeting. Remember, Commander, our guest comes from a civilization that has eliminated violent conflict. They find our, more aggressive tendencies particularly difficult to comprehend. Rachel nodded, her hand unconsciously brushing against the ceremonial sword at her hip, a tradition she now questioned, given their visitor's pacifistic nature. Understanding goes both ways, Director. Perhaps they need to learn why we are the way we are, just as much as we need to learn from them. The Luminari ship settled onto the landing pad with impossible precision, barely disturbing the air around it. A moment of absolute silence followed, broken only by the soft hum of recording devices documenting humanity's first official extraterrestrial contact. When Ambassador Talia emerged, the assembled delegation couldn't help but gasp. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her form both elegant and alien. Her movements were liquid grace, and her eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangular pattern, shifted colors like oil on water. Her ceremonial robes seemed to capture and release light with each step. Rachel stepped forward, executing the carefully choreographed greeting protocol. Ambassador Talia, I am Commander Rachel Winter. On behalf of Earth's United Nations, welcome to our world. She maintained steady eye contact, despite the disorienting effect of meeting 3 gently swirling eyes. Commander Winter. Talia's voice carried a musical quality, the universal translator barely keeping up with the complex harmonics. Your welcome honors us, though I sense uncertainty in your gathering. Fear not, we come seeking understanding, not dominion. The formal introductions proceeded according to plan, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was occurring. She noticed how Talia's eyes lingered on the security personnel, on the visible weapons they carried, on the military satellites tracking overhead. There was no judgment in those alien eyes, only genuine curiosity. Later, during the private diplomatic reception, Talia approached Rachel as she stood guard near the window. Commander, might I ask you something directly? The alien's voice had adapted to human speech patterns remarkably quickly. In our studies of Earth, we've observed that humans simultaneously create magnificent art, music, and literature celebrating peace, while maintaining vast military forces. How do you reconcile these opposing drives? Rachel considered her words carefully. Ambassador, have you ever seen a mother bear protect her cubs? When Talia indicated familiarity with Earth's wildlife, Rachel continued. We're not aggressive because we hate peace, we're protective because we love what we have. Our art, our culture, our families, we fight to preserve them, not to destroy others. Fascinating. Talia's middle eye shifted to a deep blue. On my world, we evolved past the need for physical defense. Our mental abilities protect us far more effectively than weapons ever could. Yet, there is something compelling about your species' passionate dedication to protecting what you love. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside the reception hall. Rachel's training kicked in immediately as she moved to investigate, but Talia's gentle hand on her arm gave her pause. Your instinct to rush toward potential danger rather than away from it, this too is uniquely human, is it not? It's who we are, Rachel replied simply. We face threats head-on, not because we love violence, but because we believe some things are worth fighting for. The disturbance turned out to be nothing more than an overenthusiastic group of journalists, but the moment had crystallized something for both women. As they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Talia spoke again. Perhaps, Commander Winter, what we perceived as aggressive tendencies are actually manifestations of humanity's most noble qualities: courage, dedication, and love. Rachel smiled. We're complex creatures, Ambassador. Sometimes we don't even understand ourselves. But if you're willing to look past our rough edges, you might find that our capacity for protection is matched only by our capacity for friendship. As the first day of this historic contact drew to a close, both women understood that this was just the beginning of a journey toward mutual understanding. The stars emerging in the darkening sky seemed to witness this quiet moment of connection between two vastly different species, each taking their first steps toward bridging the gap between their worlds. 3 weeks into Ambassador Talia's diplomatic mission to Earth, an incident shattered the carefully maintained peace of the New Geneva International Space Center. A radical group opposed to alien presence on Earth had breached the outer security perimeter. Commander Rachel Winter stood in the command center, her face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays as she coordinated the response. "Ambassador, please remain in your quarters," Rachel spoke into her comm device. "We have the situation under control." But Talia's response surprised her. "I wish to observe, Commander Winter. My people cannot understand human aggression without witnessing both its negative and positive expressions." The ambassador's voice carried its usual melodic quality, even through the digital transmission. Rachel hesitated, then made a decision that would later prove crucial. "Stay close to me, then. But you must follow my instructions without question." The protesters had disabled several security systems using stolen access codes, evidence of an inside job. As Rachel led her team through the facility's corridors, with Talia floating gracefully behind them, she could feel the ambassador's 3 eyes studying their every move, every tactical decision. "Fascinating," Talia murmured as she watched Rachel's team efficiently secure each section. "Your movements are precisely coordinated, yet I sense no telepathic communication between you. How do you achieve such harmony in action?" "Training, trust, and shared purpose," Rachel replied, her attention split between the conversation and the security feeds on her tactical display. "We protect each other because we're stronger together than apart." The intruders had reached the diplomatic wing's main atrium, a vast space designed to showcase Earth's artistic achievements. The irony wasn't lost on Rachel as she observed them destroying priceless artifacts in their rage against the alien presence. "They fear what they don't understand," Talia observed, her middle eye shifting to a deep purple, a color Rachel had learned indicated deep thought. "Yet their fear manifests as destruction rather than retreat." "Why?" Before Rachel could respond, one of the intruders spotted them and raised a weapon. Rachel's body moved instinctively, placing herself between the threat and the ambassador. But what happened next defied her expectations. Talia stepped forward, her 3 eyes glowing with an inner light. The weapon in the intruder's hand simply dissolved into dust. The other protesters froze in their tracks, their faces showing a mix of terror and awe. "You see us as a threat," Talia's voice resonated through the atrium, carrying an authority that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the soul. "Yet we could have destroyed your weapons, your defenses, your very civilization at any time. We chose not to, because we seek understanding, not dominance." Rachel watched in amazement as the protesters' hostility visibly deflated. Her security team moved in to detain them, but the fight had gone out of their eyes. They surrendered without resistance. Later, in the privacy of the diplomatic quarters, Rachel found herself struggling to process what she had witnessed. "You could have done that at any time? Simply, neutralized our weapons?" Talia's skin shimmed with patterns that Rachel had come to recognize as amusement. "Of course. But that would have violated our primary directive of non-interference. We wanted to understand why humans maintain these tools of violence, not remove your ability to choose your own path. Yet you interfered today, Rachel pointed out. To protect, not to harm, Talia corrected. Much like your own instinct to shield me with your body, an action that deeply impressed me, by the way. Perhaps our peoples are not so different in our core values, only in our methods of expressing them. The aftermath of the incident brought unexpected revelations. News of how the Luminari had responded to violence with restraint and wisdom rather than retaliation sparked global discussions. Public opinion began to shift, seeing the aliens not as threatening invaders but as advanced beings who chose peace even when they had the power to dominate. Your people are beginning to understand, Talia observed one evening, as they watched news coverage of peaceful demonstrations supporting interstellar cooperation. They see that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice to preserve and protect. Rachel nodded, but a question nagged at her. Ambassador, if you have such powerful abilities, why did your people ever feel the need to contact us? Surely we must seem primitive in comparison. Talia's eyes shifted to a warm golden hue, a color Rachel had never seen before. Because, dear friend, despite your technological limitations, humans possess something rare and precious, the capacity to choose peace even when your instincts cry out for conflict. You fight not because you must, but because you choose to protect what you love. This makes your moments of peace all the more meaningful. As they stood watching the stars through the atrium's transparent dome, Rachel realized that this incident had done more for human-Luminari relations than months of formal diplomacy could have achieved. It had shown both species the true nature of the other, not through words or treaties, but through actions and choices. The security breach had been contained, but its impact would ripple through both societies, forever changing how they viewed each other. In the face of violence, both humans and Luminari had chosen understanding over retaliation, protection over destruction. Perhaps this, Rachel thought, was the first step toward a truly peaceful coexistence between their worlds. The incident at New Geneva had changed things fundamentally between Ambassador Talia and Commander Rachel Winter. Their relationship had evolved from formal diplomatic interaction to something approaching genuine friendship, built on mutual curiosity and respect. This made Rachel's current task all the more challenging. You want me to do what? Talia's 3 eyes swirled with colors Rachel had never seen before, perhaps indicating disbelief. I want you to observe a military training exercise, Rachel repeated, standing firm. If you truly want to understand human aggression, you need to see how we prepare for it, how we control it, and most importantly, why we value it. The training grounds sprawled across a remote valley, far from the diplomatic center. As their transport descended, Talia watched squads of soldiers moving through obstacle courses, practicing combat maneuvers, and engaging in hand-to-hand combat training. Their movements seem ritualistic, Talia observed, her middle eye pulsing with analytical interest. Like a dance, but with purpose beyond mere expression. Rachel smiled. That's exactly what it is. We're not teaching them to be violent, we're teaching them discipline, control, and most importantly, when not to fight. The demonstration began with a complex hostage rescue scenario. Talia watched intently as the team moved with precision through the mock village, using minimal force to neutralize threats while protecting civilians. Her eyes tracked every movement, every decision point, every moment of restraint. Notice how they're choosing not to use lethal force when alternatives exist, Rachel pointed out. This is what we train for, not maximum damage, but optimal protection with minimal harm. Yet you maintain the capability for devastating violence, Talia noted, her tone curious rather than judgmental. Because we must, Rachel replied softly. In an ideal world, we wouldn't need these skills. But we've learned through bitter experience that peace must sometimes be defended. The next demonstration showcased disaster response training. The same soldiers who had just completed combat exercises now worked to rescue trapped civilians from a simulated earthquake zone, their aggressive capabilities turned entirely to preservation and protection. "This is fascinating," Talia murmured. "The same skills, the same intensity, but directed toward saving rather than harming. A duality I hadn't considered." A young lieutenant approached them, saluting Rachel before turning to Talia. "Ambassador, would you like to participate in our next exercise? It's a team-building challenge, no combat involved." Rachel watched with interest as Talia agreed, her ethereal form looking strangely out of place among the mud-splattered soldiers. The exercise required teams to work together to cross a challenging obstacle course, requiring trust, communication, and mutual support. To everyone's surprise, Talia threw herself into the challenge with unexpected enthusiasm. Her natural grace and ability to float didn't help much when the goal was to work as a team. She had to rely on her human teammates just as much as they relied on each other. "I think I'm beginning to understand," Talia said afterward, her robes somewhat less pristine than usual. "Your aggression, it's not just about violence or protection. It's about passion, the intensity with which humans approach everything they do." Rachel nodded. "Whether it's fighting, building, creating, or loving, we commit ourselves fully. Sometimes that intensity looks like aggression to outside observers." Later that evening, as they watched the sunset from the training grounds observation point, Talia shared a revelation. "My people have long believed that evolving beyond aggression was the height of civilization. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps the true measure of advancement is not the absence of aggressive capability, but the wisdom to channel it properly." "We're still learning that wisdom," Rachel admitted. "Every day, every generation, we struggle with finding the right balance. But that struggle itself, that constant questioning and striving to be better, might be our species' greatest strength." A group of soldiers passed by, carrying heavy logs as part of their training. They nodded respectfully to Rachel and Talia, their faces showing exhaustion but also pride and camaraderie. "Look at them," Talia said softly. "They push themselves to their limits not because they love violence, but because they love what they protect. It's beautiful, in its way." "Beautiful?" Rachel raised an eyebrow, surprised by the ambassador's choice of words. "Yes. Like a force of nature, powerful, potentially dangerous, but also essential and life-giving when properly channeled. Your species contains multitudes, Commander Winter. You are warriors and poets, protectors and creators, aggressive yet compassionate." As night fell over the training grounds, the sounds of activity gradually quieted. Stars began to emerge above them, reminding both women of the vast universe their peoples shared. Rachel realized that today had marked a significant shift in their mission, not just in Talia's understanding of humanity, but in humanity's understanding of itself through alien eyes. "Tomorrow," Talia announced, her eyes shimmering with newfound purpose, "I would like to learn more about your arts and music. I suspect I'll find the same intensity there that I witnessed today." Rachel smiled, knowing that their journey of mutual understanding was far from over. "I think you might be surprised by what you discover, Ambassador. We humans tend to put our whole hearts into everything we do, whether it's training for war or creating beauty." The lights of the training facility cast long shadows across the valley, but in the growing darkness, the boundary between human and alien seemed less distinct than ever before. They were simply two beings, trying to bridge the gap between their worlds, one revelation at a time. The grand hall of the New Geneva Symphony Orchestra buzzed with anticipation. Ambassador Talia sat beside Commander Rachel Winter, her three eyes reflecting the warm glow of the stage lights. After weeks of studying human military capabilities, this evening marked their first formal venture into human artistic expression. The conductor raised his baton, and the first notes of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony filled the air. Rachel watched Talia's reaction carefully, noticing how the ambassador's skin rippled with new patterns she'd never seen before. "The intensity," Talia whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "It's the same as in your combat training, but transformed into something entirely different." Throughout the performance, Talia remained transfixed, her eyes shifting through a kaleidoscope of colors. When the chorus joined in for the Ode to Joy, Rachel saw something extraordinary. Tiny points of light began emanating from Talia's skin, dancing in perfect harmony with the music. During the intermission, Talia turned to Rachel, her voice trembling with emotion. "We have nothing like this on my world. Our music is mathematically perfect, designed to soothe and calm. But this embraces chaos and order simultaneously. It's almost violent in its beauty." "That's humanity in a nutshell," Rachel smiled. "We find beauty in contrast, in the struggle between order and chaos, peace and conflict, joy and sorrow." After the concert, they walked through the city's illuminated gardens. The night air was crisp with early autumn, and the paths were quiet except for their footsteps. Talia was still emanating occasional pulses of light, an aftermath of the emotional impact of the music. "Commander Winter, Rachel," Talia began, using her first name for the first time. "I must confess something. My mission here, it's more complex than simply understanding human aggression." Rachel stopped walking, turning to face the ambassador. "I had suspected as much. My people are dying," Talia said softly. "Not physically, but spiritually. In eliminating all aggression, all conflict from our society, we've also eliminated passion, drive, the will to strive for something more. We've achieved perfect peace, but at the cost of our soul." The revelation hung in the air between them. Rachel thought about the weeks they'd spent together, how Talia had seemed increasingly fascinated not just by human aggression, but by human emotion in all its forms. "That's why you participated in the training exercises," Rachel realized. "Why you wanted to experience everything firsthand." "Yes." Talia's eyes swirled with deep purple tones. "We've been watching Earth for centuries, puzzled by your contradictions. How could a species so capable of violence also create such beauty? How could beings so aggressive show such compassion? Now I understand, it's all connected. Your capacity for conflict gives depth to your capacity for love." They reached a small fountain, its waters catching the starlight. Talia raised her hand, and the water briefly danced in impossible patterns before settling back into its normal flow. "My people can do extraordinary things," she continued. "We've mastered the physical world in ways humans can barely imagine. But we've lost something essential, the fire that drives evolution, growth, change. We've stagnated in our perfection." Rachel considered this carefully. "And you think humanity might help your people find that fire again?" "Perhaps. But we must be careful. We don't want to simply adopt your aggressive tendencies, we need to understand how you channel them, how you balance them with compassion and creativity." A cool breeze rustled through the gardens, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers. Rachel noticed that Talia's natural luminescence had synchronized with the rhythm of the fountain's flow. "Tomorrow," Talia announced, "I want to experience more of your art. Not as an observer, but as a participant. Will you help me?" "Of course," Rachel replied, intrigued by this new direction. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to paint. To create something imperfect, emotional, possibly even aggressive. I want to understand how it feels to channel passion into creation." As they continued their walk, Rachel realized that their relationship had fundamentally changed. They were no longer just diplomat and security officer, or even alien and human. They had become teachers to each other, each holding pieces of wisdom the other needed. The lights of the city sparkled around them, mirroring the stars above. Somewhere up there, Talia's world waited for her report, her insights into human nature. But Rachel suspected that what the ambassador would bring back to her people was something more valuable than mere understanding of human aggression. She would bring back the knowledge that perfection without passion was its own form of death. "Your people haven't lost their fire," Rachel said finally. "They've just banked it too carefully. Sometimes a flame needs to burn wild before it can be properly tended." Talia's eyes shifted to that rare golden hue Rachel had seen only once before. Perhaps that is why our peoples were meant to meet. You can teach us to burn again, and we can teach you to control the flame without extinguishing it. Above them, a shooting star traced a brief, brilliant arc across the night sky, a reminder of the vast universe that had brought their species together, and the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. The day of Ambassador Talia's departure arrived sooner than anyone expected. The morning sun cast long shadows across the landing pad where her crystalline ship waited, its surface somehow both solid and fluid, much like the relationship between humans and Luminari had become over the past months. Commander Rachel Winter stood at attention, her ceremonial uniform pristine, but her usual military stoicism was softened by the hint of sadness in her eyes. Around them, a small gathering of officials and diplomats waited for the formal farewell ceremony to begin. Before the public proceedings, Talia requested a private moment with Rachel in the garden where they had shared so many conversations. The ambassador's skin shimmered with complex patterns that Rachel had learned to read as emotional turbulence. "I've prepared my final report for my people," Talia began, her three eyes cycling through a rainbow of colors. "Would you like to know what I concluded about human aggression?" Rachel nodded, curious about how their species appeared through Luminari eyes after these months of close observation. "I'm telling them that we were wrong," Talia said, her voice carrying an undertone of music that seemed to resonate with the morning breeze. "We saw human aggression as a flaw, a primitive trait to be overcome. Instead, I've learned that it's inseparable from your greatest strengths." She gestured to a nearby rose bush, its thorns gleaming in the morning light. "Like these flowers, the same plant that produces such beauty also bears thorns for protection. The thorns don't diminish the beauty, they ensure its survival. And your people will accept this perspective?" Rachel asked, remembering Talia's earlier confession about the spiritual stagnation of her civilization. "They must. Because I'm also recommending something unprecedented." Talia's middle eye shifted to that rare golden hue that Rachel had come to associate with moments of profound significance. "I'm proposing an exchange program. Not just diplomats and observers, but artists, soldiers, scientists, people who can teach and learn from each other." Rachel's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You think your people are ready for that level of integration?" "No," Talia admitted, her skin rippling with amusement. "They're not ready at all. That's precisely why it's necessary. We need your fire, your passion, your willingness to embrace imperfection in pursuit of growth. And perhaps you need our perspective on peace, our understanding of harmony." A soft chime sounded in the distance, the signal for the formal farewell ceremony to begin. But Talia wasn't finished. "I've learned that human aggression isn't just about violence or protection. It's about intensity of purpose, about caring so deeply that you're willing to fight for what matters. It's about passion, in love, in creation, in exploration, in everything you do." They began walking back to the landing pad, their steps synchronized after months of companionship. "You know," Rachel said, "when you first arrived, I thought my job was to protect you from human aggression. Instead, you taught me to see it in a new light. And you taught me that peace without passion is merely stagnation," Talia responded. "Our peoples have much to learn from each other." They reached the gathering, where Director Sullivan was preparing to begin the formal farewell address. But before they separated, Talia had one final revelation to share. "There's something else in my report," she said quietly. "Something that might surprise both our peoples. I'm recommending that the Luminari consider reinstating certain competitive practices, not violence, but controlled challenges that test our limits and push us to grow." Rachel couldn't hide her surprise. "That's quite a radical suggestion." "Indeed. But I've learned that without challenge, without some form of resistance to push against, a species cannot evolve. Your human aggression, properly channeled, creates art, drives innovation, protects the weak, and reaches for the stars. Perhaps we need a measure of that fire." The ceremony proceeded according to protocol, but there was an undercurrent of emotion that no diplomatic formality could mask. When Talia finally boarded her ship, she left behind not just a changed understanding of humanity, but the seeds of change for her own civilization. As the crystalline ship rose into the morning sky, Rachel thought about the strange journey they had shared. What had begun as a mission to understand human aggression had evolved into something far more profound, a recognition that the very traits that made humans sometimes dangerous were also what made them capable of greatness. The ship disappeared into the clouds, leaving behind a world forever changed by its visitor. In the months and years that followed, both civilizations would begin a careful dance of cultural exchange, each learning from the other's strengths and weaknesses. Human aggression, once seen as a liability, would come to be understood as part of a complex tapestry of traits that made humanity unique in the galaxy. And somewhere in the vastness of space, a civilization of perfect beings began to remember how to feel passion again, while on Earth, humans learned that peace didn't mean the absence of fire, but rather its proper tending. Rachel touched the ceremonial sword at her hip, no longer a symbol of violence, but a reminder of humanity's complex nature, their capacity for both protection and destruction, for passion and peace. The morning sun caught the blade, sending a flash of light skyward, like a farewell signal to a friend who had taught her to see her own species through new eyes.